20 years ago this week, in the heart of the classical reform American Midwest, at the turn of the 20th century, I had my bat mitzvah, and I started to want to become a rabbi. I guess it was quite the Torah portion. I remember that for me, a keen, gender-minded 12-year-old girl, it was a difficult Torah portion, all about the vows that women make and who in their lives, their fathers or husbands naturally, who can cancel them. Because one gets the feeling women couldn't be trusted, the ancients who authored the portion felt, to handle their own affairs, especially not in something so serious as vow-making. But my cantor at the time, Cantor Silbersher, long-winded though he could also be, really did point out something important and meaningful to me in it. Just when I'd almost drowned as a young bat mitzvah girl in all the overly technical, dusty Torah language, searching for my sermon topic, my cantor linked the vows, the ones discussed in my parsha, Parshat Matot, to the vows we also mention on Yom Kippur in the Kol Nidre. He explained a bit about how vows were important in our Jewish tradition, thus leading us to be so fearful on Yom Kippur about committing to new ones we couldn't keep, which is why we say the Kol Nidre. And I remember my ears perked up. And then I noticed that the interpretive translation in our prayer book for Kol Nidre was different than the literal translation, and in a way that seemed to be embarrassed and hiding the true meaning of the text. And already, I started to wonder about that and not about the gender politics of my Torah portion. And without even knowing it, I was down the rabbit hole. One that I suppose many of us, in our various ways, have not come out of since. The rabbit hole of Jewish meaning, of community, of history, the rabbit hole of layers upon layers of weave that link these different strands together between my Torah portion and Kol Nidre on Yom Kippur and one little girl's bat mitzvah sermon 20 years ago. I know a little bit more about Kol Nidre now, I suppose, and a little bit more about the context of the biblical authors, and a little bit more about what Yom Kippur might mean and what a bat mitzvah might mean. But what it means to be a Jew and devote much of one's life to this stuff, I don't know. 20 years ago, when I realized I might want to go into this business, to becoming a rabbi or a professional Jew, my dad was excited because he said that one day, when I wrote sermons, I could put Star Trek in them. That's all he ever wanted, that the show that was his and my religion could be put together with our Jewish religion. Well, I will say this. Star Trek, which is a show ostensibly about humanity reaching the 23rd century and figuring out along the way that the factionalism and dogma of religion is the great irrationality that must be evolved out of. For a show like that, there was an awful lot about identity and meaning and ethics and the narratives we place around ourselves and tell about ourselves. I mean, for God's sake, Captain Kirk waxes rhapsodic about that great civil mythology, the American Constitution, for half an entire episode. I'd like to argue, in fact, that there is something very Star Trek about being Jewish. And for those non-science fiction fans among you, what I mean is really this. To place oneself in the continuity of history, within a particular subculture, with its mythos and nomos and land and people and language, is one of the great human endeavors, and we all do it. And wanting to be a Jew, or to live Jewishly, is what wanting to be what one imagines is a hopefully influential member of a particular subculture, the House of Israel. That would be great if that was what being Jewish was for all of us. Entering into deep relationship with other people, both Jewish and not, with our stories and history, and with words.